A.2.12. Is consensus an alternative to direct democracy? The few anarchists who reject direct democracy within free associations generally support consensus in decision-making. Consensus is based upon everyone on a group agreeing to a decision before it can be put into action. Thus, it is argued, consensus stops the majority ruling the minority and is more consistent with anarchist principles. Consensus, although the best option in decision-making, as all agree, has its problems. As Murray Bookchin points out in describing his experience of consensus, it can have authoritarian implications, open quote. In order to create full consensus on a decision, minority dissenters were often subtly urged or psychologically coerced to decline to vote on a troubling issue, inasmuch as their dissent would essentially amount to a one-person veto. This practice, called standing aside in American consensus processes, all too often involved intimidation of the dissenters, to the point that they completely withdrew from the decision-making process rather than make an honorable and continuing expression of their dissent by voting, even as a minority, in accordance with their views. Having withdrawn, they ceased to be political beings so that a decision could be made. Consensus was ultimately achieved only after dissenting members nullified themselves as participants in the process. On a more theoretical level, consensus silenced that most vital aspect of all dialogue, dissensus. The ongoing dissent, the passionate dialogue that still persists even after a minority accedes temporarily to a majority decision, can be replaced by dull monologues and the uncontroverted and deadening tone of consensus. In majority decision-making, the defeated minority can resolve to overturn a decision on which they have been defeated. They are free to openly and persistently articulate reasoned and potentially persuasive disagreements. Consensus, for its part, honors no minorities, but mutes them in favor of the metaphysical one of the consensus group, end quote. Bookchin does not, open quote, deny that consensus may be an appropriate form of decision-making in small groups of people who are thoroughly familiar with one another. But he notes that, in practical terms, his own experience has shown him that when larger groups try to make decisions by consensus, it usually obliges them to arrive at the lowest common intellectual denominator in their decision-making, the least controversial or even the most mediocre decision that a sizable assembly of people can attain is adopted, precisely because everyone must agree with it or else withdraw from voting on that issue, end quote. Therefore, due to its potentially authoritarian nature, most anarchists disagree that consensus is the political aspect of free association. While it is advantageous to try to reach consensus, it is usually impractical to do so, especially in large groups, regardless of its other negative effects. Often, it demeans a free society or association by tending to subvert individuality in the name of community and dissent in the name of solidarity. Neither true community nor solidarity are fostered when the individual's development and self-expression are aborted by public disapproval and pressure. Since individuals are all unique, they will have unique viewpoints which they should be encouraged to express as society evolves and is enriched by the actions and ideas of individuals. In other words, anarchist supporters of direct democracy stress the, open quote, creative role of dissent, which they fear tends to fade away in the gray uniformity required by consensus, end quote. We must stress that anarchists are not in favor of a mechanical decision-making process in which the majority just vote the minority away and ignore them. Far from it. Anarchists who support direct democracy see it as a dynamic debating process in which majority and minority listen to and respect each other as far as possible and create a decision which all can live with, if possible. They see the process of participation within directly democratic associations as the means of creating common interests, as a process which will encourage diversity, individual and minority expression, and reduce any tendency for majorities to marginalize or oppress minorities by ensuring discussion and debate occurs on important issues.